Good morning, one and all. On this auspicious occasion of Basant Panchami, I would like to mark the beginning of day 2 of this virtual conference by reciting a few lines from Saraswati Vandana. Ya kundendu tushar har dhavala, ya shubhra vastavrita, ya veena varadanda mandita kara, ya shweta padmasana, या ब्रह्माच्युत्य शंकरा प्रभृतिभिर देवया सदा पूजिता सामं पाते सरस्वते भगवते निशेष जदयापहा. A very happy Basant Panchami to all of you. This festival marks the arrival of spring season and is celebrated with great favor across the country. On this auspicious day, may Goddess Saraswati bless us all with knowledge, wisdom, happiness, and prosperity. And it seems like my wishes are already coming true. I am sure you all must be wondering how. Well, today, coincidentally, all the honorable vice chancellors are connecting and discussing the course of holistic and multidisciplinary education. On behalf of Association of Indian Universities and Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, I, Namrata Sehrawat, would like to welcome all the distinguished guests and delegates to Day 2 of North Zone Vice Chancellors Meet 2021. I would welcome Honorable President AIU, Dr. Tej Pratap, Honorable Secretary General AIU, Dr. Pankaj Mittal, and Professor Mahesh Verma, Honorable Vice Chancellor, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, and all the distinguished Vice Chancellors of universities who have joined us here today. We will now begin with our third technical session for this conference on theme technology integration, including online and digital education. The same would be moderated by Professor Anju Saha from University School of Information, Communication and Technology. Over to you, Professor Saha.
Thank you, Namrata. A very good morning to all the dignitaries, honorable vice chancellors, and distinguished guests. I, Anju Saha, Professor, University School of Information, Communication and Technology, Guru Gobind Singh Indraprastha University, cordially welcome all the dignitaries on the day 2 of AIU North Zone Vice Chancellors Meet 2021. This is the third technical session, and on this session, we'll deliberate on the implementation strategies of National Education Policy 2020 with special reference to technology integration, including online and digital education. Technology provides quick access to the required information. That is what makes its use in the classroom so important. Online and digital education creates effective learning experience for students. In this pandemic era, the use of technology could enable the possibility of remote learning. I'm honored to share the chairperson for this session is Professor Pankaj Jalote, former director in the Prastha Institute of Information Technology, Delhi. Professor Pankaj Jalote is currently working as Distinguished Professor at Indraprastha Institute of Information Technology, Delhi. He was the founding director of Triple IT Delhi. He has worked as professor and head of computer science department at IIT Kanpur and as chair professor at IIT Delhi. He served as interim vice chancellor of Delhi Technological University. He is the author of 5 books, some of which have been translated in Chinese, Japanese, and Korean, etc. Indian edition of his text on software engineering was the best-selling book by the publisher. We welcome you, sir. We have with us 3 eminent speakers for the session. Our first speaker is Professor Jagdish Arora, former director in FlipNet. Professor Jagdish Arora is currently an advisor, National Board of Accreditation. He worked as librarian at IIT Delhi and IIT Bombay. He was the first national coordinator for Indian National Digital Library in Engineering Sciences and Technology Consortium, LNIS and eShod Sindhu. He is a recipient of several national and international awards, including Fulbright Professional Fellowship, Ltd Leadership Award, and Young Librarian of the Year, etc. He was awarded a citation and memento for his contribution to digital initiatives for higher education by Honorable Sri Pranab Mukherjee, the then President of India. We are honored to have you here, sir. Our next speaker is Professor Vaidya Subramaniam, Vice Chancellor, Sastra, Deemed University, Thanjavur. Professor Vaidya Subramaniam is alumnus of Harvard Business School with interest in public policy and higher education management. PhD in the area of MBA education in India from University of Virginia. He is a member of MHRD committees, CII, and various academic bodies. He is the Young Manager Award winning team member, Madras Management Association 1996. He is regular columnist for New India Express and occasionally writes for Times of India and Tughlaq. He is the author of Express Writing, a book predominantly on education policy. We welcome you, sir. Our last speaker is Professor M.M. Pant, former Pro Vice Chancellor, Indira Gandhi National Open University. Professor M.M. Pant is an internationally renowned expert specializing in pedagogy, technology, and development of tools and curricula using the latest available technologies. Professor Pant's current work and interests revolve around the development, delivery, and promotion of educational products, processes, and services that cater to the needs and interests of future learners, a framework that is named Learning 221. His past roles include being the faculty of IIT Kanpur, MLNR Engineering College, and as visiting professor, University of Western Ontario, Canada. He has been a visiting scientist at European research centers in Italy, England, Germany, and Sweden. We welcome you, sir. Now I request respected chairperson Professor Pankaj Jalote to kindly take the session forward. Over to you, sir.
Okay, good morning, everyone, and good morning to the distinguished people on the panel. Just to put the structure in place, I've been told this is the broad structure. Each one of us will speak for less than 10 minutes initially, and then we'll have about half an hour of discussion, and then maybe a wrap-up, a few minutes of wrap-up if time permits. This session is to end at 12, and I should mention to the moderator that I have to leave 5 minutes before 12 simply because I have a class. So in case the discussion is going on, etc., please forgive me while I leave, and the moderator will carry forward, though I hope we can wrap it up there. Okay, so I will self-time myself, and I request the moderator to please warn us, each one of us, when about 7-8 minutes are over, so we can keep time. So I will start. Can I share my screen? Okay, yes, I can share my screen. So let me share my screen, and I have put together some slides to discuss the things that we want to. The theme of this. So I request everyone who's not speaking to please keep it on mute so we don't have any noise. And moderator, please, if there is any different challenges in listening and so on, please warn the speaker. So this is the topic of the panel discussion today: technology integration, including online and digital education. I thought I will just put in some scope. So we are talking about higher education in university and colleges. The reason it's important to say that the role of technology in schools and children is actually very, very different. So I would imagine that our focus is higher education, the colleges and universities and so on, right? So let's probably focus on that if possible. The higher education programs, therefore, we are looking at essentially are bachelor's, master's, and PhD, right? And I'm putting that the basic goal of these education programs is to develop learning in students as per the desired outcomes of the program, right? So bachelor's in something has some outcomes, masters has some outcomes. Right? So that's the goal of the education program, to develop, to educate so that those learnings are developed. Now, I thought I'll just put down, where does the learning in a program happen, particularly the ones that are, the undergraduate and masters, where. So, where does the learning happen? Almost all education programs, the unit of instruction by teachers is typically a course, right? That's whether it's a year long, now pretty much throughout the country, it's semester courses. So courses are the unit of instruction where a subject is given, which the instructor then teaches to the students of the class. But besides the courses, the learning is happening in a program in various other ways. So certainly a lot of learning happens in projects, field work, labs, research that students do, presentations, a whole lot of things that happen, which are beyond the coursework, where sort of actual physical activities may be happening. And it's well known that a lot of learning, overall learning, because generally the outcome of education programs is also to develop citizens, critical thinking, socialization, teamwork. Many of these things get strengthened through peer learning.
बहुत बहुत लंबा लंबा फेंकना
So
फिलोसफी
peer learning.
का कोई रिलेशन ही नहीं है
Please, can we keep it on mute? Thank you. Peer learning is through interaction, through socialization, etc., that students learn. Right? Now, the focus of digital education today, as I see it, is mostly on courses. Though, yes, labs, there is some virtual labs and other things, but largely, and of course, information sharing, right, which has been there for quite some time. So the digital education of the learning, if we look at these three main tracks of learning, it's focusing on one of them, namely the courses, and facilitating projects, facilitating peer learning through collaboration tools, but largely the focus is on courses. Now, within courses, there are different elements of teaching in a course, right? What do we do as instructors? We lecture, we explain some concepts, give examples, and so on, right? Typically 40 hours of lecturing in a course or some of that level. Then, of course, learning is happening because the students practice. We give homeworks, we give labs, we ask them to write something, prepare presentations. So student practice is of course, practice is the foundation of learning. And then there is assessment, which is integral to learning. You can't have learning without assessment. And assessment don't mean just tests, but homeworks, projects, labs, exams, tests, quizzes, all are part of assessment. Right? Now, if we look at, so within the course, which is the element of instruction, which is where the focus of digital is, out of the three main paradigms of where learning happens. Within these three things, the focus as of now, the digital or internet, the major role is in lecturing. And that's where, if you see, most of our attention is. There is a limited role in student practice, you facilitate and deliver. Role in assessment as of now is limited, but that's likely to become bigger with more artificial intelligence and so on. And of course, role of delivering information for practice, so what do you, when you need to practice to see demo videos, etc., that will continue to increase. So in lecturing itself, there are two modes, as we all know. Synchronous and asynchronous. Now, while internet-based education, it caught the imagination through the MOOC, the asynchronous mode, some about a decade ago. And the promise was that anytime, anywhere, low cost by the best experts in the world, etc. Because it allows possibilities of scale and time is not a constraint. But asynchronous didn't really catch in India much. At least at the college level. But we saw in COVID situation, synchronous really became very, very common. That is, all of us started giving lectures online. That was a synchronous mode which is very familiar, similar to face-to-face lecturing, but it's augmented by taped lectures and other aspects of technology. It has different challenges because you don't see the students, and somebody can be sort of attending, so to say, while not be physically there. Okay. So therefore, as I see the role of digital going forward, it's clearly an enabler. It provides more flexibility, new tools, new approaches. There is no doubt about it. But its role, I believe, is limited in the overall education. So people who think that it will replace existing approaches or transform, I have my doubts about it, because, as I said, education has different ways of ensured doing learning. Of that, only one way is really where digital is making a big impact. Within that, also, that is in the coursework. Within that, also, we are only looking at lecturing as the main way where internet is doing. So overall, I think going forward, the education model will evolve into a blended mode. That's the good thing about having learned how to go online in COVID. Older model will be improved with the digital model. That's how I see happening. But the dominant model for the near future will remain the one that we have seen, with innovations coming in. Okay, so I would end here by just letting you know that last year this book came out, which is called Building Research Universities in India, based on my experience, 10 years experience in IIIT Delhi, and 2 decades in IITs. Any academic leader, if they want a copy of this book, complimentary, please send me an email. I think AIU sent to some people, but perhaps not all. So if you want, my email is there. Okay, thank you very much for listening. I think I have been within time. I'll stop sharing my, okay, I've been stopped. So I guess overall, over to Dr. Professor Jagdish Arora.
Good morning, sir. Good morning to everybody. I'll again be sharing my screen. Just a minute. Well, apparently, I have some problem in sharing screen, but anyway, I'll read out my contents. Just a minute. Give me another minute. No, I'm not getting the things. Anyway, I'll just read out the presentation. I have been involved with the content creation when I was director at Inflibnet Center, and I also offer a course called Digital Library on Swayam platform. This is in fact 6th iteration of the course that I'm offering. So basically, in fact, Dr. Pankaj Mittal was the person who was involved in content creation in EPG Pathshala. That was Inflibnet Center was one of the partner. We developed content for about, I think, more than 60 courses, and several of them were repurposed for Swayam also. So what we created at EPG Pathshala was about 20,000 e-text, 19,000 video, 3,200 experts, and 723 courses were involved in it. So many of them were later converted into Swayam courses, including the one that I offer, course on digital library. Now, EPG Pathshala was one of those resources that were used very extensively during this COVID period. And we came out with some what is called off-spin or off-product, byproduct of EPG Pathshala. E-Adhyayan is one of them, because there are about 20,000 or 23,000 texts. These texts are made available as textbooks. So there's a platform called E-Adhyayan where all the text of these courses are available. We also came out with another product called ePathya. ePathya is nothing but a subset of EPG Pathshala, customized for a university based on the courses that they offer. So it is given on hard disk. You can host it on your website. University can ask for ePathya, for which would be basically a subproduct of EPG Pathshala. InfluBnet provides for that. We also came up with a repository called Vidyamitra. Vidyamitra is basically a repository of e-content which have contains not only from EPG Pathshala, but from NPTEL, as well as all other resources, all other courses that are developed using NPTEL funding. So EPG Vidyamitra has about 44,000 texts, 66,000 videos, including NPTEL videos, EPG Pathshala videos, and even Swayam videos are also available. So Vidyamitra is a great repository which you can use for various purposes. Now, coming to massive open online courses, MOOCs, which is Swayam. At InfluBnet Center, we had developed in library science about 16 courses. Out of the 16 courses, 10 courses were selected for offering on Swayam. So these were kind of reformatted, repurposed for offering it onto the Swayam. And Digital Library is one of the courses that I am offering now. This is the sixth instance or sixth time that I'm offering that course. We have about 951 students registered. Last time it was about 1,815 students registered. But one of the problems with MOOC courses is registration is high. But when it comes to completion and active students, they are very low. Like last time we had out of 1,815 students, only 160 students were active, and only 39 students appeared for the examination. So a problem with the MOOC is that registrations are high, but then pass out or those who seriously take the course is very low. Now, if you look at the steps involved in MOOCs or creating a MOOC, first of all is, of course, content creation. You develop e-content. Second is content hosting and delivery. Third is examination. Fourth is assessment. And finally, fifth is certification. So let us look at each of these steps. The first step, content creation. As you know, quadrant. First of the quadrant is, of course, e-text. E-text you can develop using MS Word, WordPerfect, one of the word processing software. Then self-learning. Self-learning is basically a video record of, in Swayam, terminology or conditions, specification. It has to be about half an hour video. So one have to develop that half an hour video, which should include graphics, animation, simulation, whatever you can put. So this is typically done, or rather typically outsourced to outside company, although animation software, graphic softwares are all available, but the faculty need not burden themselves on these aspects. This source can be outsourced to an external agency. In fact, InfluBnet had empaneled a number of agencies who take these kind of jobs. Self-assessment is another aspect of it, where basically you provide objective type questions and even descriptive questions to the people on the platform, which is attempted by them, and they know what the results are. Especially in case of objective type, the platform itself assess them and give them the results. They know how much they've learned in the process. Last, learn more. Learn more is basically you give references to other sources, other resources that are available on the given topic. Now, the next, of course, content creation is a teamwork when it comes to, especially online courses or e-learning, because when you say about 40 lectures in a course, it cannot be done by a single person in a limited time. So you employ content writers, a coordinator, a course coordinator, gather a number of content writers, and those content writers write the content. Of course, the team also include an external agency who develop a video for you. Now, content hosting and delivery is another aspect. When it comes to platforms, for e-learning, the platform is generally eTutor, or in case of WebNet, eTutor was the base for LMS, and for MOOCs, Swayam is what we use for hosting the content. Now, in Swayam, you have to upload the content in a course library and then sync that course library with your course. So, and of course, self-assessment exercises are to be uploaded, assignments for internal assessment have to be uploaded at that time. So, and then of course you interact with the people using chat. The chat service are inbuilt into the system. There are facilities to announce. If you make some announcement, there are facilities for emailer. You can send email to all your participants. But there is no inbuilt functionality for real-time interaction. So you may have to use services like video conferencing, the one that we're using, Zoom or others, for interacting with users in real time. That happens very occasionally, but there is a provision. So you can monitor the progress. There are dashboards available on the platform that can be used for monitoring students' progress, how much they have attempted, how much they haven't, the assignment that they've submitted, and assignment that are due, the courses that you have uploaded or courses that are due for upload. So those things are can be monitored using dashboards that are available for students as well as for the course offering. Now, examination is another aspect. Online is facilities given by Swayam. So you have to create 2 sets of question papers using a utility called eSulek, which is available on the platform. And then you can create objective type of questions. You can create a number of objective type of questions. So like, for example, multiple choice test, column matching test, true and false statements, fill in blanks, all kind of facilities are available. And you have to give their answers also, so that automatic assessment is possible by Swayam. So when it comes to objective type of questions, automated assessment is possible on the Swayam platform. Of course, subjective type of questions you can give. They were very recently created facilities where you can also come in. The things are scanned and put it in a platform called e-tracking. And with e-track on or assessor, one can look at the script, annotate it, give marks, and that are totaled up and all. So basically, all things were created during COVID period. So COVID became kind of a bless that you don't have to go to the NTA, which is responsible for conducting exam. You can assess it online using assessors, and eSulek is for creating questions. Of course, there is a proctored examination taken by NTA, which of course they have center all across the country where the proctor exams are taken. So like I mentioned, objective type of questions are assessed automatically by Swayam platform. But for assessing subjective type of question, TrackMark or RM assessor has been created for that purpose, so that the review and totaling is done automatically. Finally, certification. Students can download their certificates online once they have completed the course successfully. Now, I'll just touch upon what are the options available for universities in India as far as Swayam is concerned.
Can you try?
One is that they can be the host. They can host in the sense that faculty can be encouraged to create content or create courses for Swayam, host it on the Swayam, and the universities can offer it. It can become a host university to host a course. This announcement for inviting expression of invents are available on the UGC website. In fact, right now the announcement for UG courses is already floating on the website. Of course, faculty can become content writer for other courses that are offered by other faculty members. And you can, lastly, university can adopt courses available on SIAM and ask students to enroll en masse for courses identified by a university. So, of course, you know about the regulation. There is a credit framework for online learning courses through SIAM. It's already available. In 2016 onwards, 20% of marks can be uh, obtained from SWAYAM through credit transfer. The steps that universities are required to adopt are: you can amend your ordinances, rules, regulations to incorporate provision for transfer of credits from host universities. Step 2 is select the course. You can select the courses that your student should take. You can use your own methods of assessing the courses that are available on the SWAYAM, and then announce your students, and you can take any of these courses. Designate course coordinators. Universities are required to designate course coordinators, disseminate information about the courses that you have identified and the dates when students are required to assist. Then encourage your student to register for the course, and of course, evaluate students register for more courses based on quizzes, assignments, sessions, and finals. So one can become kind of intermediary between the courses offered on SIAM and the courses that are taken by your student. Finally, important marks of grade communicated by the host tuition in final mark sheets of the student, and practical and lab components can also be added by the university itself. So give equivalent credit weightage up to 20% for the credit earned through SWAYAM received by the host institution. So this was my little input about my experience with SWAYAM. Thank you for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Arora. Thank you for this about all the content that you are facilitating to creating and the facilities that are there. I would now like to request Professor Dr. Vaidya Subramanian to speak for 10 minutes or so. Please, over to you, sir.
Thank you very much. Before I start, just want to ensure that my slide sharing is enabled. Is it?
Yes, we can see it.
Yeah. So thank you very much. Very good morning to the distinguished panelists and a very, very learned audience, which only organizations like AIU can manage to assemble. I'm extremely happy to be a part of this panel discussion. And in my next 10 minutes, I assure you I won't go overboard on time. I am just going to kind of present a quick snapshot using the Dragon Slayer approach, which I must confess that I got this idea from Professor M.M. Pant, who's going to be the next speaker. When he made a presentation 15 years back, I distinctly recall in 2005, about the Dragon Slayer approach for management education. And I must confess that I've been using that model for many of my academic presentations because I think this approach is kind of a Tylenol for many of the academic problems that we are facing. The reason that I am using this word, a Dragon Slayer approach, is because the rate at which there is a spur in the digital and online education is happening, the reaction time is very minimum. The expected output is very uncertain. But the fact that higher education institutions have to engage in this digital and online mechanism is something that everybody has to accept. And it's like kind of a dragon coming, trying to take over a kingdom. And how we should handle this is the growing challenge as we move forward. So the context, as I had clearly said, is because one, as Professor Pankaj was mentioning, there has been a consistent rise in the demand for online education in the last 10 plus years, over a decade. And still, there is a growing demand, considering the fact that from registration to completion, the rates are not satisfactory. Recently, in Indian geography, the acceleration because of the COVIDian momentum has been so high that all institutions have somehow managed to get into the digital and online phase. Some did it successfully, some just managed to survive, some failed, but at least understood that this is a possible journey. Thirdly, that is now opening up through regulatory space and the Atmanirbhar, where there is an opportunity for Indian higher education institutions to register their significant presence as not only a consumer, which we have been so far, but also as a contributor by offering online courses for a global learning community. And fourthly, there is a growing understanding of this emerging paradigm of phygital pedagogy, which is physical as well as digital, which clearly means that online or digital education is not a substitute for the brick and mortar type institution. This bits and bytes mode of digital and online education is clearly not a substitute for a brick and mortar institution, but definitely a supportive intervention that has to be handled properly by institutions across the board. So, this is the context. Now, if we need to handle this context, then let's say as institutions, we are more aligned towards designing a courseware, a curriculum, a syllabus for programs. Now, if digital and online education has to be viewed as a dragon slaying exercise, that if you successfully you are able to slay the dragon, that then you have won the digital and online game, then what is that has to be packed as courses? Assume that this is a 1 year course, then I would have 3 semester 1 courses. Dragon anatomy, if I can call it that way. We need to understand what actually is digital and online education all about. Is it just connected devices, or is it just PDAs, or it's just availability of internet, or just a laptop, or is it an assimilation of all of them creating a coherent synergy? Now, those basic understandings of what it needs inside the anatomy of online and digital education has to be very clear. The what of it, the why of it, who does what, all of that, in my view, has to be captured in this imaginative course called Dragon Anatomy. Then the dragon physiology will explain how things work within this anatomy. How we need to make sure that all those that will fuel this dragon anatomy work. We need to design an overall framework. We have various models here and there, but we need a concrete design that puts an synergistic framework, providing us clear structures and verticals on which this physiology will work, well-defined protocols to ensure uniformity and consistency. Then just as all programs will have communication or English or any language, I have this language course called Dragonese. Now that's about the language of engagement, both the language per se as we use it, whether it's in English or Tamil or any of the language that universities use, and also the computational lingo of what type of programming languages will align better for an online and digital landscape. And thirdly, human machine interface. What type of instrumentalities beyond just a machine and a human are there going to be, edubots or those that are trained to understand this language that will maybe add on as a supportive tool to enhance the learning experience. If we move to semester 2 courses, that's where the real action starts. How are we going to create a warehouse of these courses? So we need to build a huge Dragon storage and warehouse, which has all sorts of data, faculty data, student data, learners data, all type of data, their expectations, their background, an entire piece of demographic data, a course building protocol, a course building platform. Then how are we going to deliver that? What type of assets need to get into this warehouse? What type of library that we need to create? And today with the growth of online libraries, how we can interface with existing digital databases and online libraries, technical resources, all this have to be clearly put in place, because the purpose of this entire exercise of this AIU conference is to create an implementation plan for NEP 2020. So this has to be clearly factored if we are going to be very serious about implementation of NEP 2020. The next, Dragon financing and strategy. We need a huge budget. What sort of a budget is required? Clearly, there are allocations that are part of the union budget and allocations that are given to various statutory and regulatory bodies. Beyond that, the states also have their own education budgets. Student education is in the current list. Now, beyond just government allocations, whether it's center or state, how are universities themselves going to align a part of their own budget for digital and online medium? How are they going to leverage and synergize with corporates, other philanthropic grants to finance this huge monster called digital and online education? We need a strategy, a blue ocean strategy. I would be the first to maybe support a call that says a blue ocean always considers existing, the status quo as irrelevant. So I have a feeling that we should, for time being, whatever be the modes that are available, consider them to be irrelevant and think of something that is new. We need to create such blue ocean strategies, because this has to be a winning strategy not only for India but for the entire world. We need to market it properly. We need to promote these programs properly. So we need to have a good financing and strategic map in place. The last course in semester 2 would be the Dragon values and evaluation. After all, dragons also have values. Today, everybody has values. Maybe there will be something called Dragon rights also. They also have values. So we need to understand what type of values need to be built in digital and online. This is very important. On one hand, we need to build assessment engine and tools. We need to ensure what type of assessment will suit for certain types of courses. We cannot say it's going to be descriptive and then in your evaluation ask MCQs, or cannot say MCQs and ask descriptive questions. There must be a two-way trust between the teacher and the taught. There should be evaluation etiquette. Students have to ensure that they don't abuse the system. Faculty or anybody, all the stakeholders must take a moral reserve, a moral stand, and say we are not going to abuse the system. We have to cooperate and build brick by brick for the success of the system. Now, to do this, the models of engagement is very essential. We need to Amazonize this digital and online ecosystem. It's not just about courses. It's bringing together all stakeholders into one exchange. The regulators, the faculty, the students, the technology product providers, the service providers. Now, all of them have to come into this Amazon. Now, this is required. The second is we need to Uberize, which means that everybody must be given an opportunity to host their courses, to provide their courses, or to bring people into this. The choice must be market driven. Why only certain types of universities can put it on Swayam? Why you need only people with PhD to come and offer courses on Swayam? There are people with no formal education but have tremendous knowledge which can be shared in this online medium. So we need to bring all type of teaching learning community into this online exchange. We need to democratize this, means that it has to flow from bottom to up. It has to be a bottom driven approach rather from top to down. Then tech size it. We need a right sized technical model to ensure that we don't expect institutions to have more than what is required or fall below standards. There must be an optimal tech sizing to ensure that institutions are endowed with the right type of technology infrastructure based on the type of institutions they are. Now, these are required. And finally, the extent to which such models succeed depend on the extent to which universities and higher education institutions drive this. And if institutions are successfully doing this 1 year course, then there can be three outcomes. One, a distinction that my university created my own courses and I delivered it on my own platform. I would consider them to be distinction universities or first class universities. Maybe I outsourced courses done by different people from different places, but delivered in my own digital platform. Or the last option, as Professor Pant also used the same word in his presentation, or we just do, a PR for the dragon. So engage in public relations for the dragons. We say good, online is good. We hail online, but we fail ourselves in creating our own courses or creating delivery platforms ourselves. But definitely we will be supportive of online education. Those are the second class types of institutions, which are these three graduating options. So I stop here and I will be happy to take questions as we move forward.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your talk and your PowerPoint. I would now like to request our last speaker, Dr. Professor Pant, to share his thoughts. Looks like Professor Pant also was at IIT Kanpur. I have also spent a good deal of time as faculty as well as student in IIT Kanpur, so we have perhaps something in common. Over to you.
So thank you, Professor Pankaj Jalote, for let's say catching up again from IIT days and so on. I must thank the organizers for giving me this opportunity to hear three very splendid presentations. And what I will do is build on these. So I'm not going to use a set of PowerPoint. I have often said that it limits your thing. I want to respond to what has been said. Professor Pankaj Jalote threw open the door by saying that in this online thing, when assessments are done with AI, they will open up a great thing which would be transformational. Both Dr. Arora and Dr. Subramaniam elaborated on some of these things. So I'll quickly now come to what I'm trying to say. And let me first begin with my conclusion. My conclusion is AI is the savior for higher education. I'll begin with a story of Albert Einstein. So when Albert Einstein was a professor at the Institute of Advanced Study in Princeton, New Jersey, 1 year he gave a set of questions. This is the year 1905, and there is no computers, no photocopiers, nothing. So he writes down the questions in his hand and gives it to his teaching assistant, who is supposed to get it typed and distributed and collect the answer books and bring it back and so on. And the teaching assistant notices that exactly the same questions which were set for the same students the previous year. And he walks up to the professor and he says, "But professor, how can you give exactly the same questions to the same students which you gave last year?" And Einstein kind of smiles and says, "You are right. The questions are the same, but the answers have changed." Now, the story is that it changed because in 1905, Einstein published 4 great papers in Adelaide physics. One was on photoelectric effect, one was on Brownian movement, one was on special theory of relativity, and the fourth was on energy mass equivalence. And these transformed physics and everything else that was going on for the last 300 years, Newtonian, Maxwellian, etc., got completely changed. We are seeing a similar, not ditto, but analogous situation in education today. The questions are still the same. What do we teach? Whom do we teach? How do we teach? Where do we teach? We talked a lot about pedagogy here. And how do we see that what we are teaching is relevant to what is happening? And the change this time is not because of one person's theoretical work, but because of a number of developments were happening simultaneously. The most important one is what we call, in fact, what Professor Klaus Schwab in 2016, January at Davos said, the fourth industrial revolution. And for the last 4 years, you've been hearing various things about the fourth industrial revolution. And you're hearing so many technologies, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things, 3D printing, blockchain, AR and VR, and so on and so forth. Now, this is the point that it's trying to say, that this is changing so rapidly. And the other important thing is the book, which I recommend all interested in education to read if they haven't seen it before, called The Fourth Education Revolution. This is by Anthony Seldon, who was a vice chancellor at Buckingham University, but was also a head of a school. And therefore, he cuts across the whole thing in that book. So unlike Pankaj Jalote, who said, let's stick to higher education here, that book is talking about right from school education, college, university, and so on. And the third thing is the pandemic, which has happened. And the pandemic is the one which has really shown what we are capable of. And this is where we have to go from. So the challenge to higher education today is that these things are changing so fast. How do we create people equipped for dealing with these challenges and opportunities in a short time? Now, I'll go back to another story. And since I'm part of the IIT system, I have a PhD from Roorkee University, which is now an IIT. I taught in IIT Kanpur for about 10 years, and I was a member of the board of management of IIT Delhi for about 6 years. And therefore, I have a certain kind of a more direct experience and insight about IITs. And what I want to share with you is that engineering education existed in India before the IITs were created. Guindy College of Engineering is probably the oldest engineering college, not only in India, but outside Europe. We had Banaras Hindu University. We had Roorkee, which was called Thompson College of Engineering. And there were about a dozen or so engineering institutions when the IITs came. And apart from many other things, and as I said, everybody has freedom to choose something. And what I choose is why the IITs were different is because they created a generation of engineers who used computers. In contrast to the slide rule, which was the hallmark of the engineer. In my days, when I was young, the engineers had slide rules, and the doctors had stethoscopes, and these were their hallmarks. But when the IITs came, they went into not just doing a calculation through whatever device, but to be able to program things. And I'm emphasizing this because IIT Kanpur had a US IBM computer, IIT Delhi had an ICL computer, IIT Chennai had, I think, a Siemens computer, IIT Powai had a Russian computer. So although the hardware was different, but the paradigm of finding the algorithm to solve the problem, rather than doing it again every time, and then a programming language to do it, was the big difference. And I attribute the success of the IIT students who were this shift of solving a problem to solving a generalized version of the problem and to be able to execute it. Now, why I'm saying that is that in the 60s, this transformed, and I have no hesitation in saying that IITs created a new breed of people who were not mere engineers, but problem solvers. And today what is happening, and this is a subtle difference which people need to appreciate, we are moving from traditional algorithms to learning algorithms. And this is where AI and machine learning. So where is all that AI intelligence coming from? It is coming from learning algorithms. And what is a learning algorithm? According to the famous book by Thomas Mitchell on machine learning, a learning algorithm for a given task P with performance measure P is such that the performance measure P improves with experience E. And then your experience can be supervised learning, unsupervised learning, reinforcement learning, and so on. But why this is dramatic is that a few years ago, we saw Garry Kasparov, the human chess champion, being defeated by IBM Blue. And more recently, we had the human Go champion defeated by AlphaGo. And what is more interesting is AlphaGo Zero, which learned by itself. And this is the point that I'm trying to make, that we now need a situation where well-educated humans and artificial intelligence will work together to solve the wicked problems of our time. Many of the things that we today call act of God or act of nature or something that we have no control will become no longer acts against which we can do nothing, and people are talking about progress in health and climate change, economics, reducing inequities, all these kinds of things that are there. And this is where the point is that we need to look at very quickly the AKTU in Lucknow with its team of the Vice Chancellor and the Pro-Vice Chancellor, Vinay Pathak and Vineet Kansal, they actually created a course on AI awareness for all engineers, because it didn't make sense that you have engineers who are not aware of AI. What I'm suggesting for the rest of the universities is to create an awareness AI, because AI is impacting everywhere. So we need to create, and to some extent Dr. Subramaniam talked about it, we need to create an AI, no matter whether you're going to be a marketer or you're going to be in health or you're a doctor or a lawyer or whatever, you have to understand how this regime of learning things does. The AKTU also did something else. They used a chatbot to answer questions and so on which people may have about the university. And many of you would have heard that Professor Ashok Goel at Georgia Tech created a chatbot called Jill Watson to act as a teaching assistant. So now we can imagine chatbots for registrars, vice chancellors, pro-vice chancellors, deans, faculty. Every faculty would have a chatbot, so that all the trivial, routine, ready-made thing that was there is going to be handled by that person. And only when it is something which is very important, it will come to hand. So what I'm trying to say is that we should look at AI as a major part, and we've already done part of it. Now, during this pandemic, we have already transformed the front end. All that I'm saying, the back end now will first be humans, then humans assisted with AI, then more and more AI and less humans. But together, eventually there will be a symbiotic relationship between humans and AI to enhance the productivity, because we need, there's a mind-boggling statistics that 1 million people turn 18 every month in this country. You have to do large-scale stuff. You cannot do this in things where there are 300 seats or 400 seats or 500 seats, and then there's a competition, there's a coaching institute and so on. I think we have to straight bypass all those things and say you start learning, and there could be flexible modes. You can learn certain amount, reach in a certain things, and the AI itself can have recommendation engines, etc., in terms of what you would do. So this is briefly what I have to say. What I've done is I've written a 1,500-word text, which can be read in about 5 minutes, and I put it in my blog at mmpant.com. You can go to twitter.com/mmpant and also find it there. And you can find it in Facebook or LinkedIn and so on. So all over there, I put this in somewhat more detail, because time is precious. And I think, so with this, I will say thank you and all the best to you to explore these various ways of progressing further in higher education. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Pant. Great. It's about 11:30. So I think we have another half an hour for people from the audience to ask any questions they may want to. So please, I would request you to keep it, or comments, because these are all very, so comments or questions. I request you to keep it brief. And Professor Anju, I will leave at around 11:50, 55, and I'll request you to continue coordination after that. Okay, please. Anyone? I would imagine. There is a. How would they have? They can just unmute themselves and speak, or does or Professor Anju, you need to unmute them?
They can unmute, sir.
Okay, so please, anybody who wants to speak anything, please unmute
I have
yourself.
a question,
and say,
Professor Jalote.
yes, please.
Hello, can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah.
Actually, this one question is for Professor Jagdish Arora. He talked about the digital library and SWAYAM and so on. I was interested because I'm from the basic sciences, physics. What about labs? I think those are our biggest challenges on the digital platform. How do you incorporate, actually getting the student to do an experiment and understand how it works? So I'd like to know if Swayam also has something on that. Professor Arora?
Professor Arora, would you like to respond?
It's not there.
While he's coming in, you're still muted. There was this whole project of virtual labs, as you may be aware. But I think as of now, and so while this technology will mature, as of now, that's what I was trying to say. There is some scope where all these online, etc., are very good, and we should tap it. But there are others we shouldn't. As of now, as Dr. Pant said, AI and all that will solve lots of things. As of now, it will help you in some things, and some other things have to be done separately. But if Dr. Arora is he there? Dr. Vedya, let's just wait if Dr. Arora can answer because she asked it directly to him.
No, Dr. Vaidya can answer it.
I think Dr. Arora is not there. So Dr. Vedya, please go ahead. You wanted to say something.
Yeah, though the laboratory part is very critical, as Professor Pankaj pointed out. The NMEICT mission projects, virtual labs, all of that are available for a certain set of courses. So those portfolio of courses have managed to deliver some hands-on experience in the virtual mode. But assume that that's the generic model that can fix the online laboratory experience for all courses is not possible. So there are still a large number of courses that cannot be delivered. Even I hear certain programs, even in engineering, done off campus and all. I mean, I don't know the learning outcome for such programs, but those are definitely not the candidates for online education. But what we need to distinguish, especially the agency like UGC must distinguish between practicals and practice. I have a feeling that all of them are getting confused and put under the common umbrella. So the need for online courses can be further enhanced by delinking those courses that require practice and not practicals through laboratory experiments. And while laboratory and practicals, if it requires virtual labs, unless it can deliver the learning outcome that is expected of the laboratory, it's risky to get into the online mode in such candidate courses.
Like you can never substitute a botany fieldwork or a geology fieldwork with a virtual.
Yeah, even the virtual labs are limited in scope to electronics, where, things that you can do through simulation, etc. So field work, there's no sociology, field work, there's no. So as of now, the technology is, and we should always recognize the limits of technology and keep in mind that the limits will keep extending. Okay, Dr. M. Anand, would you like to? Okay, maybe I'll read out the questions that are. Okay, there is some people who are also replying, by the way. So, Ms. Anu, you can go there. Nupur and Dr. Anant has also replied availability of models for simulation, IIT Madras, virtual physics lab, etc. So certainly simulation has been around for a long, long time, and those things that you can simulate will help. Anybody else would like to make a point or raise a question or a comment?
Yeah.
Please go ahead, sir.
Yeah, Dr. Jalote. I know it's very exciting that we're looking to technology, for a practical and practice. Although these are, as Dr. Subramaniam said, that these are two different things. But because I being from a medical background, so so I am very excited that how much this digital technology or technology, of course, from diagnosis and for treatment planning, surely, but otherwise, in a medical education, how much impact it's going to make, besides, the diagnostic part and treatment planning, where we might utilize artificial intelligence and things like that. But otherwise, because a typical medical education, and medical, I'm not saying just medicine, it's medicine, dentistry, nursing, pharmacy, Ayurveda, all medical streams. And how much, what do you think?
Sir, you would be better positioned, but as my limited this thing, I can, because somebody came and told me about these things. There are apparently now these virtual reality things available through which you can practice surgery. I was told. Okay, I'm told that they are at a very advanced stage. But you are in a better position to actually tell us how useful those may be.
No, I know. No, but
Yeah.
Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam, he gave an example of anatomy and physiology, and he brought the dragon in. So that's why I got slightly excited that, I know that. Yes.
In fact, the NMACT virtual lab project, the virtual anatomy laboratory as a virtual lab was developed at Shastra as a partner, just like Amrita has done for a few modules. Many institutions have, but that was just a basic explorative exercise. So I wouldn't take that as a laboratory to substitute and say you are an expert. It's only exploratory, but not to build expertise.
I think Professor Anuj also wanted to say something.
Yes, sir. Good morning, everyone. My question is to Dr. Vaidya Subramaniam. Sir, why do we call the process that you have identified as Dragon Slayer, which I understand the process which is very enchanting, very promising, very lively, very constructive. The very name Dragon Slayer nowadays frightens more, which otherwise may have been. So I don't know why it is. I mean, this question has been coming since I heard you. Yes,
it's
sir.
very simple because we are confronting something that we don't know much about, and still we are at the primitive stages. So we shouldn't be afraid by the gargantuan size or the monstrous feeling of a dragon when online and digital is so sweeping and large.
Yeah.
We should be bold enough to slay it and win over it and then build a positive transformation from it. And that's the reason why I use that word.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, anybody else would like to?
I would like to make a comment. This is
Yes, please.
Professor Datta from USBS.
Yes, please.
And I think for medical practice, a virtual thing is a bit dangerous,
Okay. As I said, you guys will know more, but I was told that there are these, and people claim that for practicing surgery, before you go and actually practice on actual people, their claim was it works, it helps to get your hands better, etc., with virtual reality kind of toolkits. But as I said, I'm much far away from that. If you or Professor Mahesh have some experience with such toolkits, you can probably share with us. As a practice, not to get your hands to get something there before you practice on real people.
It's like teaching someone to fly on a virtual platform.
They do it all the more, whether it's a train, this thing, or whether it is a plane or now cars, all the complicated stuff. People build simulators on which you first try before you're given the real thing. Right? That has been there for a long, long time, by the way, right? Planes, etc. That's been there for a long time.
Now we are using simulation, a lot of simulation and haptics, for basic, the basic skills, but the high-end skills, are, of course, it has to be critical thinking and it has to be applied. But the fundamentals, that can be done on a simulation and haptics.
Sir, how about robotic surgery?
Yeah,
That's also, that's artificial intelligence.
That can help actually.
Again, robotic surgery is where you have a case which is straightforward, which is where something which can be done repetitively, repeatedly. There it can be done by a surgeon, but where it involves, as you open up and involve what is to be done, robotic cannot. Any straightforward case where you think.
Just a second.
Miss Queenie,
Sir, my concern is, may I, sir?
Yes, Miss Queenie Pradhan, and then Mr. Kamal. I'm not able to see hands. So please forgive me. Whichever I see, I will call. But
Yeah.
please forgive me.
My question is
Miss Queenie, and then after that, Mr. Kamal.
Thank you. Primarily, I come from the social science background, and my concern is when we say technology, artificial intelligence will solve many problems, but we also have to look at the other side of it with regard to the problem of inequality.
Others, somebody who's not speaking, there's background. Out whose sound is coming and ask the person to mute. Oh man. Yes.
It is Kiran May. Kiran May, please.
Yes.
Mute yourself, Kiran May. Yes, that's okay. Go ahead, please.
Thank you. My question coming from social science background is maybe many problems will be solved with the coming of artificial intelligence and technology, which of course is the need of the hour. But we also have to keep in mind the inequalities which will be there. We need to bridge that simultaneously along with the coming of the inequalities. This in particular is based on what Professor M.M. Pant said. So, of course, there is one which is a very positive side of technology, but we also have to look at the consequences of this kind of technology, which is only may perhaps widen the gap between those who will not get access to such knowledge. So that is my concern, which I wanted to flag.
Good point, but I think what this should be treated as for any technology. Every technology that will solve some problems will introduce some new problems. That's true of anything, right? Whether it's automobiles or whether it is, so everything. So we should expect that. And that's where people are, and that's also, that adds another set of problems to work.
And we need to have solutions for it.
That's always true of any technology. And the hope is that humanity filters only those technologies which have a net positive gain. And let's hope that it seems like AI will give us a net positive gain, but there is going to be definitely, we as an institute have a lot of, at least 2-3 centers which are working on AI and all that, using AI for various things. So we have some sense of it. Mr. Kamal, you had something to say.
Yeah, yes, my concern is, yes, if the the students at a very basic level at the school or the graduation level are trained with virtual labs, then when they pass out and comes to the market for real serving the nation, then it will be an issue. Although it has been discussed that yes, before practicing, they may be exposed to real experiments. But my hesitation is, will they be in a position after trained on a virtual platform to cope up with the higher level of actual live or real experimentation?
Good point. And I think as of now, nobody would claim that it should replace. Yeah. I think these are all augmenting. I don't think anybody would want to claim, let's do away with everything else and do this thing. But these are augmenting your, it's a toolkit. It makes you, perhaps the number of labs may reduce from 100 to 60, 50. And also we know there is enough evidence already that too much of this, there is other aspects, or particularly for school children. They learn social skills. They learn the people dynamics. They learn how to cooperate, teamwork, this, that, how to take no, how to take, all those other things are hugely important, particularly for children. So, and we don't fully understand that. So we are there for technology to come and help, but not to replace
that.
Not in
very
the
true.
right?
Very true. Very true.
Not close to auto driving where we can.
Yeah.
In next 5 years, we can have a driverless car. I don't think we
Driverless
can have instructorless classrooms anytime
I
soon.
have a question, sir. I have a question.
I think ma'am, Dr. Pankaj was raising her hand. Yes, please go ahead.
See, I mean, you are talking of instructorless classes. My question is to Dr. Pant. Whenever I listen to him, it is very, very exciting and very, very knowledgeable. Thank you, Dr. Pant. My question is that when we talk of so much of technology and so much of MOOCs courses, many of our teachers, because I was handling MOOCs in UGC, many of our teachers had this fear that technology may replace teachers, or maybe the need of teachers will be less, or maybe the teachers will have to acquire a skill which is totally different from what they have today. So one, can technology replace teachers? And second, if not, then what type of skills the teachers have to acquire, and who will help them to acquire those skills so that they are not replaced by the technology?
So very good. Firstly, no technology can replace teachers if the teacher is a full-fledged teacher. If the teacher is only doing limited stuff, having a course material which he reads out every year, then technology will replace it. So it is a very simple issue. The point here is that most of us get forced to do certain things which is not our best cognitive ability, lower down ability, like grading answer books, making questions, doing this, making report cards, all this. If this is taken over by technology, you have time for more interesting things, like it was being talked about medicine. Now, it is very interesting. So the role, you all know that from Bloom's taxonomy, etc., the highest level is creativity, analysis, cross-pollination of ideas. We don't do that because we are limited to covering syllabus, exam, etc. Now, the very important thing is, and this point has been made by many people, and I want to spend some time emphasizing it. We all think of technology as the earlier computer technology. The key difference between AI and traditional thing is that AI is a self-learning technology. So when they were talking about doctors and this thing, pre-training is the old thing, but today an AI-supported doctor is far superior to an individual doctor because that has the data of thousands of patients which have been analyzed and processed for him. Whereas an individual doctor can have only what he or she has experienced. Now, for the medicine people, Eric Topor is a very well-known person. He has two books. One is called The Patient Will See You. Now, typically we said the doctor will see you now. Now he says the patient will see you now because much of the data the patient will already have and have from simple devices, and the doctor is to now interpret that data. The role of the doctor is largely to interpret very complex data because human body is the most complex organism. So when doctors have more time to interpret those data and some of the simpler things is done by their assistants, it is fine. As far as teaching is concerned, there are, I mentioned this very briefly when I said that every teacher can have a chatbot or an AI assistant to do the lower level task and concentrate on the new things which the teacher really wants to do, which is the changing things. Our problem is that most of the teachers are spending time in status quo. Every teacher, basically, as I said very often, why a teacher is very important is a teacher can transform an ignorant person to an informed person and then to an expert person. If we can do this in larger numbers, because to me, the challenge is have a large number of people who are unfit for future. Now, we have seen earlier good institutions like IITs and IIMs on one kind, and maybe St. Stephen's, etc., for liberal education of another kind who've done this. Today's university graduate should be widely knowledgeable. In fact, there's a very nice book, again, which I would recommend everybody interested to read called Range. This is a book by David Epstein, released only in 2020, called Range. And what it has disputed is that our immediate past model of early specialization, he has challenged and said, no, don't do early specialization. Let people do all kinds of things. Now, people like us were not taught biology at all, physics, chemistry, maths, and so on. And now that I look at biology, I find it's the most fascinating thing. And now we have something called synthetic biology, quantum biology, photosynthesis is a quantum phenomenon, olfaction is a quantum phenomena. So the idea that biology is only descriptive and nothing about functional. In fact, another very interesting thing is a book called What is Life by Sir Paul Nurse, who's a Nobel laureate. And What is Life was written by Haldane in 1929, by Schrodinger in 1944, and by Paul Nurse in 2020. And he talks about 5 aspects of life. He talks about cell, the replication, that is genes and DNA, then evolution, the chemistry of life, and finally he says life as information processing. So when we give people this whole thing, they will not feel marginalized or limited, but they will be able to go. So what David Epstein says in his range is that cut across various things. And I put this in a way that don't treat life or career as a ladder. Treat it as a jungle gym. You are here, then you jump to something else, then you jump to something else, and so on. And I can say this with some fun because I have done that. My basic training is physics. Then I went into law. I actually worked as a lawyer for 7 years. Then I came into computer science. I was a professor of computer science and so on. I was also an entrepreneur. So this is what we should see, that this idea that you define the person very early is no longer a right thing, because the world is changing. It's not because of you. You may be great, but if the world is changing, then you have to adapt. So engineering is about making. Biology is about growing. Biology is about adaptation. So you see how things change, and we have become what we are because of that adaptation and movement. And this is hugely fascinating. There are now birds which don't fly. So the ostrich, the dodo, this thing cannot fly. They have all everything. It's like if we don't use our brains to the full effect, we will no longer be humans. If we cannot learn and think and so on, we will be like birds who cannot fly. It's very interesting. And therefore, higher education is more important because this is where you open up. You take an 18-year-old and transform them into a 21-year-old, which is completely, so far we made him specialized, engineer, doctor, lawyer, architect, etc. Today you're saying, no, you are a child of the universe, you have single planet, you could be looking at climate change today, you could be looking at economic health tomorrow, you could be looking at something else, and you're equally familiar with the basic concepts. You don't have to go to the details because there the machine will help you.
Yes, sir. I have a question about how about AI and consciousness?
Respond to this a little bit.
Yeah, AI and
consciousness.
Oh, you see, this is a very tricky situation. There are very well-known, reputed people like Roger Penrose, etc., who believe there is consciousness and it can be explained from physical phenomenon. They, in fact, have identified a part in the brain. Earlier, they were looking at the synapses, and now they have said it is the something a microtubule, which is where the consciousness states lies, and they are quantum states. So as long as they are coherent, and so on. Roger Penrose won the Nobel Prize this year for black hole. Opponents believe that quantum phenomena cannot be kept in such a warm, wet kind of a temperature. Most quantum thing we see is near absolute zero, very close, and so on and so forth. So people like Max Tegmark, etc., doubt that. Like it happens in physics, we can get surprised. So who thought photosynthesis could be a quantum phenomenon? It happens at all kinds of temperatures and so on. The lab quantum thing. So this is what is very important, that as we go across, the problem with consciousness and many other things is also that how do you exactly define it? How do you look at it? But there's a whole set of people who believe that quantum mechanics is related to consciousness. In some senses, believe that our superior part of the brain is also because the brain is a quantum machine. It is not the classical electronics machine. So there is a huge work going on in what is called the second age of quantum technologies. So just like at one time when we were young, electronics was the big thing. Electronics was looking only at the charge of the electrons. Today we are talking spintronics, which is looking at the intrinsic spin of the electron and various things that come out of it. So
Dr. Rita has a hand up, but before I just give me a minute, I would like to just point out there is this whole talk about connections and all that, but at the same time there is an alternative model which I personally subscribe to for education, and that is that the world is also getting very, very complex. The does not understand anything now. So actually, there is a very important role for people to understand whatever they do. If it's computing, they better understand it. If it is medicine, they really need to. Body of knowledge is so wide that you can't. So therefore, the model that is now being proposed and which I implemented very successfully in IIIT was what we call as a T model, that you need to have a certain breadth, but you must develop expertise in something. Somebody who's expert in nothing has very little value in today's society.
Correct.
Okay. Dr. Rita and Dr. Anshu, Professor Anju, I will leave in 2 minutes. Over to you after this.
I have just, since Professor Pant was talking about the brain and the nature, I think we are in the Anthropocene. And in Anthropocene, recently a book has come out by Richard Lew, and he has written a book on the last child in the woods. Our brain is evolving, that's what we are thinking. And maybe the future, those students who are young, their brain will totally evolve in a different way. And the Darwinism is going to be changed over a period of time. It will be a neo-Darwinism, because our brain will be connected or will evolve with the nature around us, but with all the machine around us, like AI. So this is what I think. So that's what I just wanted to comment on. That okay, we are talking about machines, so our brain is evolving in the machine in Anthropocene. So we are dominated and we are trying to take over everything whatever is around us.
Okay,
and that's how the education will change from the experiential to the machine way, or maybe synergistically. So.
Okay, over to Dr. Anju. I will leave it to you. I'm leaving. Thank you very much for everyone for joining. Anyone in this panel, if you wanted to request a copy of the book, I had sent you, you can just send me an email. Thank you very much. Have a good session. Bye.
Professor Rita,
I think Anju, you can
continue with your question, please.
Sorry?
Dr. Rita has finished. Dr. M.M. Pant was continuing. Dr. Pant, you...
Yeah, so I can continue with that part that she was. See, it is true that we are calling this the Anthropocene age. In fact, it is this year where the total amount of mass generated by humans has become more than the natural biomass. So that is why it is very important. What the future will be, we need to see clearly Darwinian evolution by trial and error and survival of the fittest. Survival of the fittest is really no theory. It is saying, Jo jeeta wo sikandar. So that is not a theory has to explain in advance that if you do this, you will succeed. If you do this, you will win. Or if you do this, you will thrive. And therefore, surely the the path of evolution will now probably be no longer statistical by trial and error, but will be more deterministic. And that's where I use that word synthetic biology. Now, synthetic biology is a whole field where now that we know all life is made out of DNA, and DNA is adenine, thymine, cytosine, guanine, we could just pick up these things, put them together, and now we know genome sequencing is also done. Genome editing is also done. So you can create life forms according to this thing. And the big change that will happen in the so-called Anthropocene era, that so far science was trying to understand how nature works. The next level is going to be where we've created something and we will predict how it is going to work. And this is what is going to be very interesting.
That will change the whole life on the earth.
So it's like software that you create and software you decide that this is what it will do. See, the Zoom meeting is not a natural phenomenon. It is out of a software that we created and we were able to do this. So therefore there is...
it is really enriching, Professor Pant.
Yes.
Very nice. Way you have put in.
That was then extended to the other activities, including academics as well as an examination by the end of that very 2013.
No, I couldn't hear. Was there anything specifically said?
Hello.
Yes.
So, may I ask you a question?
Sure, sure.
Actually, I missed a bit of the conversation with Professor Rita Singh, but I just caught the last bits, which were very interesting. I was wondering if you, what are your views on what Yuval Noah Harari talks about when he says that AI is something to, guard against in the future, because if it's going to replace things like higher level thinking as well as creativity, it could make a huge a number of people very insecure and irrelevant.
Yeah, but every time people are made insecure. So hasn't the COVID-19 made you insecure? So the point is this mistaken notion that the world that we see is the world as it always was or will always be is a mistaken notion. If you talk to a number of people, they will always say, oh, now things have become very bad. When I was young, it was very good, right? Whether you talk to anybody, this is a universal phenomenon. Even in Babylonian times, they would say that, no, what happened in the past was very good. These are very bad times. So this is one part. But the point is very interesting. We are in an accelerated progress. I haven't even shared with you some of the other things which people are saying, and let me share that to excite you a little more. Now, once we understand life and we understand various things, there is a question about, are humans mortal or not? Now, we have believed that humans are mortal. Every man born must die. So says the Bhagavad Gita also. But where is the fundamental principle from which this comes? There is no fundamental principle. All that we know is that everybody we knew about till today has died. But does it mean this is inevitable? Pure logic says no. This is what is called inductive reasoning. Now, I will give you an example. Till October 1957, if you threw up something, it would come down. What goes up must come down was a universal law. But on 4th of October 1957, the Russians put up a Sputnik, which did not come down. And now we have millions of satellites. These don't come down when you push them up, because we understood that physics says, and you said you were from physics.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So physics says, and you teach this in class 8, that if you throw it with a velocity which is more than the escape velocity, which is 7 miles per second or 11.2 kilometers per second. Now, it took you that time to reach technology for escape velocity. But the principle that if there was escape velocity, it wouldn't come back. So what medical people are doing, they're looking at all causes of death and what gradually we eliminate. You were very young, but there was a time when people died out of typhoid, they died out of tuberculosis, they died out of malaria. You don't hear those deaths anymore. Now you see only cancer and a few more things. Cancer also, they are now beginning to understand. So the point is, and I like this thing I read somewhere that from the year such and such, in no death certificate in the US is the cause of death written as old age. In fact, I went through the form, it says you will not write old age, you will not write senescence or any other adjective which describes old age. Here it is very common to say he died out of complications of old age. Then no, eventually some organ failed. So you have to say which organ failed, what was the cause of that failure, and what was the proximate cause of that kind of a thing. So whether it is liver, kidney, heart, whatever, what happened. And this has been kind of looked at. And gradually they're saying that we won't go after disease, we will go after aging. Now, when aging is understood, and it is very interesting, today there are 2-3 theories of aging. One is the free radical theory, that you have oxygen, and then the other is the telomere theory, that your DNA, last things are called telomeres, they get shorter and shorter, and say a couple of others. Now they are saying whatever you age by the day, if I put it back, like, in a bank, they do customer service and then they keep open for a time till they settle everything so that next day they can start afresh. So if every day, all the decay that has happened, all the degeneration that has happened, part of it is recovered by sleep. But whatever has not been recovered by sleep can be recovered by certain drugs, anti-aging drugs. And they have said that the people who believe in this, say that 100 years will be like what 70 or 80 is today. And actually there is no upper limit. And there are certain biological organisms from yeast to this thing, starfish, etc. They live for thousands of years. So now you imagine when you tell somebody that you could live for, it is not necessary that the person is happy. So the point is you may live, but are you happy? Are you healthy? Are you whatever? And so on. So these are very interesting things because once you start having the knowledge and solving problems, there is, in fact, things that we see today were unimaginable. You see any old movie, you can see the Mughal-e-Azam about the Mughal emperors, or you can see Crown about the British royalty. They didn't have any of those things which we have. No microwave oven, no induction cooker, no nothing. So, yeah.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question, please?
Yes, yes.
Sir, I am Professor Suresh Kumar from School of Biotechnology.
You're supposed to tell the answers now.
Sir, my question is related to how technology will help in imbibing education related to values, morals, and ethics in the society.
This is the most important question today. In fact, actually, in the age of AI, there's a whole field about AI and ethics. Because eventually what happens is that ethics is a very tricky subject. Ethics does not mean illegal. Ethics is legal, but you shouldn't be doing it. And therefore, where do the principles of ethics come from becomes very difficult. And what is ethical for one set of people is not ethical for another. And in fact, I just now touched on that thing. When you have increasing longevity, will you encourage euthanasia? Will you allow senicide? There is a custom in Tamil Nadu where elderly people are actually killed. And it is called Talai Kuttal. And what happens is when elderly people come to a stage where there are more liabilities and their property is to be shared, the family gets together and performs the Talai Kuttal of this person. And it came to light because one of these old people ran away to the police station and complained that my family members want to kill me. But this idea of senicide, as it is said, of trying to do this is fairly common. We see infanticide, female infanticide is common here, at least fairly prevalent. So the ethics and morals start coming into this thing, that what do you do? And it's a very difficult thing. The only common principle for ethics today is reciprocity. Treat me like you would want to be treated yourself. But it is a very challenging thing because it changes with times, it changes with circumstances, and we all teach our people to kill the enemy, etc., etc. So just because that person was part of you, there was some political thing that became a thing, and you say, now they're my enemy. And you must swear to be able to kill that enemy. So it's a very tricky thing. Unlike the laws of physics and chemistry, we don't know what are the immutable laws of human behavior. Everything about human behavior is what we see, and you are a biotechnologist, you know a large part of it because of the hormones, because of the electrical pulses that flow, and so on and so forth. This person who is laying down his life is just because that adrenaline at that time increased. Otherwise, he would not. So this is a very interesting thing. So my personal interest, on which I read a lot, is trying to see what is the molecular basis for human action, both individual and social. So this will take me several lives to understand, but in mice, they gave food, one with lithium, one with the isotope of lithium, one neutron more, and the behavior of the mice was very different. One of them was very depressed, etc. The other was very happy, just because of one nucleon different in what they were having in lithium. And you know this. I mean, see, we talk about the happiness hormones, right? So dopamine, oxytocin, endorphin, all these things. So it's because of that. And we know drug addicts who take all those drugs so that they are happy.
May I interrupt you, sir, Professor Pant?
Yes.
Can I raise a question?
Yes,
I raise
yes.
a question?
Yes.
Professor, really your speech very interesting, impressive, and thought-provoking. And especially you have gone beyond the information technology, spoke about the value, ethics, and all. I am from Tamil Nadu. I'm the Vice Chancellor of a university. But the information what you have shared just a few minutes ago about the people of Tamil Nadu, they kill the aged people. No. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. This kind of information, as an experienced person like you, without any authentication, without any witness, because the soil of Tamil Nadu is known for respecting the elders. The joint family system is 100% is there in Tamil Nadu. Okay, Professor, when a forum like this, people of educationists and well-experienced people, the information like this will indirectly spoil, tarnish the image of the state and the people of the state as well. It is for a kind information and submission. It's not the case. Totally, I want to object it. Please.
Okay, so anyway, this is some information which was there in the newspapers at that time and so on. And it is not to generalize. It came out of this practice, and this practice is prevalent somewhere in some parts. And this was reported news item. I have not investigated it, and this was long time back. I'm saying from memory. So what I'm saying from memory is true. It is not, it may have been out because this person went and complained to the police. And therefore, this story came up in this thing. Otherwise, it wasn't. So that is all right. But I don't mean to either generalize it or whatever. I just, I will apologize if I've made a reference to context. But I'm saying, but the important point from an ethical perspective is wherever there is an English word for it called senicide, which means killing the elderly, just like fratricide and patricide and so on are words which come because it happened somewhere. Okay. So the point we were saying is that in a long-lived society, would we have this kind of danger? Because we know infanticide is there all over, female infanticide is all over there. So the point that I was trying to say was when we talk about ethics, things completely change because who decides whether it is ethical or not? In India, we had the sati pratha. The satis were voluntarily getting this thing because that was what was part of the culture they were indoctrinated in. And so therefore, when we talk about things like ethics and values, what I said, it is relative. It depends upon how we look at it and what we look at it. And this is why I said we still don't have any good theory, a universal theory about life. See, Darwin only said survival of the fittest. But what is the purpose of life? If you look at it very objectively, see, philosophers and Aristotle, and they have said purpose of life is a life of purpose, it is an unexamined life. But like in physics and chemistry, we know it is minimizing the energy. It is doing that, or at some part of ecological, we say it is for expansion of the population. So genetically, we have only the fit genes which will survive and propagate the population. But given a population, what is the best for its future collectively? The entire thing. You have to look at the children, the young, the middle, and the old age, and so on and so forth. Why do we retire people? We retire people because we say young must get an opportunity. If these don't retire, there will be no opportunity. So these become tricky issues on which there can be a fair amount of bias. Carl Jung, for example, in his famous thing has written that our entire society is biased against the aged. We all look at the young people becoming adults and leading a life and everything is there. In fact, he uses a very nice phrase. Where is the school for the second half of life? He said, first half of life is growing up and becoming part of the world. Second half of life is giving up the world and going away. Who teaches us about that? Who teaches us what is the graceful way of leaving the world and going away? So these are very interesting things. And that's why I said there are no simple answers to it. Some people try to believe that, no, you must always remain singing, dancing, etc., etc. Our view rather is, no, you must give up things one by one so that you learn to be detached from the world and so on and so forth. So, so what I was trying to talk about was the general issue that these questions of ethics don't have a simple answer. Law is prescribed. So by the authority, it makes a law, it says, okay, for example, here it says suicide is illegal. Abatement of suicide is illegal. Now, there are other parts of the world where they say, no, why should suicide be illegal? Why should I have a punishment for attempt? A poor chap, he failed in his attempt to suicide, then you want to put him in jail.
Sir, we have now to close the session.
Yeah, I'm happy to. I
Professor
hope you enjoyed it. And
it was really nice. It was good. But then in the valedictory, because the chief guest will be there, so we have to keep time.
Yeah.
So it's always a pleasure listening to you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you for an insightful session. As we conclude the technical session 3, on behalf of Association of Indian Universities and Guru Gobind Singh Intrust University, I extend a heartfelt thanks to the respected chairperson, Professor Pankaj Jalote, and speakers of the session, Professor Jagdish Arora, Professor Vaidya Subramaniam, and Professor M.M. Pant for such an insightful session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you so much, Professor Saha. I would again like to thank the Honorable Chair and eminent speakers of this session for a very nuanced discussion